Thank you so much for coming out to the first talk of the Bright Lights, Green Sites speaker series. My name is Samit Kadakia. I'm a third-year joint degree student here between the School of Management and the School of Forestry. And I just want to start by taking a few minutes, just maybe 30 seconds actually, to talk about Bright Lights, Green Sites and the motivations for setting it up. Bright Lights, Green Sites is a speaker series that's focused on bringing innovative and exciting urban entrepreneurs to campus. And the rationale for doing so was primarily that we have a lot of great speakers that come to FES and to come to SOM and talk about the environment and talk about sustainability. But I would say about 85% of those are old white men that work at land trusts. And nothing against old white men who work in land trusts, but I think there's a shift in the way that a lot of us are thinking about how we want to work in sustainability and how we want to make a change in the environment. And so the speaker series was really meant to try to bring in some fresh voices from people who are working in LA and New York and San Francisco and Chicago, and who are working in fashion and food and transportation and retail, just so that we have the opportunity to hear what their stories are and what they have to say. So our first speaker, who I'm very excited to introduce, is Yael Aflalo. She's the CEO and founder of Reformation. And Reformation is a revolutionary lifestyle brand that utilizes sustainable fabrics and practices to create cool and feminine limited edition collections. Reformation offers stylish, eco-conscious garments, proving that fashion and sustainability can coexist beautifully. And Yael is dedicated to transforming the current harmful retail practices by leading a sustainable revolution in the fashion industry. So she's going to be giving a 20-minute talk, which will be followed by a moderated Q&A by Professor Julie Zimmerman, who's a professor of green engineering and the assistant director for research at the Center for Green Chemistry and Engineering. So let's welcome Yael.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me. Okay, so I will start with my first company. So I had my first company when I was 20. It was a typical clothing line. I've never really had a job before, so my parents are both entrepreneurs, and building a resume and shopping for a job is not something I was trained in. But making a skirt and walking into stores and asking them, do you want to buy some of these, was a totally comfortable experience for me. So that's how I started. I had that company for 10 years. At its biggest point, it was doing about 25 million. And first 5 years were really exciting, building a business. I had to figure it all out. I didn't really know what I was doing. And that was really fun. And then I sort of started to figure it out. And in the second 5 years, I just really hated it. So it was like that thing where you're like, oh, I'm learning this, and then you get to this point where you have the knowledge and you're like, this industry doesn't make any sense. So I can go through some of the things that just didn't make any sense at all. So there was these really long lead times, about 18 months. And in doing so, you had to project on your inventory before you got your orders from the stores. And this is how it all works. And the reason why fashion has so much inventory issues, which you guys will see as promotional strategies. So everything's always on sale. There's always like this whole sale cadence. And then there was the big aftermarket inventory issues, right? Where you see the Rosses and all of those things, and then all of these big internet companies that came to rise out of this, was just this gigantic amount of extra inventory because of the lead times. So I didn't like that. I didn't like the minimum. So if you needed to buy 500 of something, you weren't allowed to. You had to buy a minimum of 1,000, and the price break at 1,000 made it more economically sound than buying the 500 with the surcharge. So you did that knowing that you'd have to off-sell it. And it was just this whole thing. Another issue was, and I didn't really recognize it as an environmental issue at the time, but it was just all the waste. I have like a clutter problem. If you come to my house, there's not a lot of stuff everywhere because I don't like it. And having this company was like the exact opposite of what I was comfortable with. So just stuff everywhere, right? Lookbooks, if you need 200, there were thousands of lookbooks and sample lines and duplicate sample lines. And it just was crazy, so that you have this gigantic warehouse full of stuff and you're constantly getting rid of all of it. So when the recession hit, I was excited to close the business. So it was also like coming from my family of merchants, this business was successful, and so there was no way I was going to be allowed to leave it, right? My parents were like, there's no way, this company makes money, you cannot leave. So when the recession hit, I closed it. And I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And I had a lot of debt from the first business. And I sort of took this opportunity for a year or two where I took some time off and I started to do things that were things you always wanted to do. So I didn't go to university. So I sort of had my own university for 2 years. And I learned a lot about science. I learned a lot about technology. I learned a lot about these new business models I was seeing. So when I grew up, I didn't really grow up in a world where anything was possible, like I think the world is now. The world that I grew up in was just kind of, I felt it was different. And maybe we were starting to see when I was younger, the tides changing for technology, but you didn't really see this disruption in the rest of the world and other industries. And I was starting to see it at this time. This is about 8 years ago. I was very excited about it, seeing these like 22-year-old billionaires and industries getting changed overnight. I was like, it really appealed to me. I wanted a part of it. And so started to become very interested in that, science, technology, started reading a lot about the environment, watching a lot of documentaries. You know, you have these things where you're like, you get a Netflix account and you start watching all these different environmental documentaries. And you're like, God, I got to do something about this. I'm going to join a charity. I'm going to go pick up trash on the beach. I'm gonna stop eating meat. I'm gonna only eat free range. And you have these moments where you're gonna do it, especially, and they last sort of, I call it like the tailwind is like 12 to 24 to 48 hours after watching these documentaries, and then they kind of slowly fade away. So I was doing that, and I needed to make money especially to pay off the debt from the last business. So I started a business with Urban Outfitters where I made clothes for them, and I sold them. So I would make clothes for them. They would get made in China, and then they would get shipped to Urban Outfitters. And I was doing this a few hours a week, and it was very lucrative. And they asked me to do a shoe brand. So I was like, I don't know how to do shoes. Of course, I would like to learn. I'll go to China and I'll figure it out. And I did that. And the night before I left for China, I had a dinner at my house, and there was a girl that was dating somebody I knew, and she was an economist at the UN, and she shows up at the dinner, and I don't remember her name, but she's like, what, starts asking me questions about what I do, and, oh, you're going to China tomorrow, and then she just started laying into me, like, are you aware of the impact of fashion on the environment? Are you aware of the labor standards in China? Are you aware of this, that? And she just really laid into me, and I was sort of taken aback because these are things that I hadn't thought about. When I went to China the next day, I kept thinking about her, and I had been to like Hong Kong and Shanghai, but I hadn't really been to mainland China, to the areas where they were doing the manufacturing. So there's this area that I'm in, and they're producing 80% fashion, and the pollution's on a scale that's hard to sort of understand if you can't see it firsthand. So it's sort of like 2 blocks, there's no visibility, you become winded when you're walking a block or two. There's these waterways by, in the middle of the city that are polluted and really sludgy. And then there are people alongside there, farming rice, and it was terrible. And I got really, really depressed, and I came back to the city, I came back to the States, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I had this sort of moment where I had an incredible amount of empathy just from having seen the impact firsthand. And then I started to have this other thing, which was this incredible amount of accountability for it, where I was like, okay, I'm making 50,000 dresses a month for Urban Outfitters. All these dresses are made out of fossil fuels. I understand that now. They're all going to take hundreds of years to biodegrade. I understand how they pollute the environment the whole time they're biodegrading. I don't think I can do this. And I was just like, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can make these clothes anymore. And I was sort of like, well, what am I going to do now? I had developed this I had developed this expertise in fashion, and I just didn't feel like I could utilize it anymore. What's more, I came back and I started trying to shop for things, and I couldn't find anything. There wasn't anything for me to buy. And I sort of started to think, well, I have this very big interest in new business models. I have this expertise in fashion that I've developed over 15 years, and I have a very real desire to solve this issue of fashion's impact on the environment. And I knew it didn't have to be, so I had started researching it, and I was like, there's like so many small wins like that can be really impactful by just changing like these things where you could improve it 60% or 50% or 70%. Why is nobody doing anything like this? And so I came back and I was like, I'm gonna figure this out and I'm gonna build it. And that's what I did. So I can talk a bit now about how I built it, and let's talk about marketing first. So I didn't know anything about marketing. In my old business, we didn't do marketing. Marketing wasn't something that I knew anything about. But I was very interested. I was very interested in it, and I just started like learning. I'm like, oh, okay, this is how they do marketing. This is how this one does it. So I kind of do, now I understand what I was doing, but I understand the terminology. I would just sort of do a landscape analysis and like kind of pull out things that I liked, figured out what best practices were, kind of utilize things from different industries, and I would kind of create these sort of pastiched marketing. But basically what I did is I realized that the biggest problem with sustainability in fashion was that it was very much perceived as very granola and crunchy, and people didn't want to be associated with it. So the first thing that I did is I thought, okay, how do you reposition something? And I used denim as an example. So denim had been this workwear thing, right, where it was like very like blue collar, like not cool or sexy. And Calvin Klein had put it on like Brooke Shields, super sexy, right, no top on, layer down, prepubescent, like totally inappropriate photographs. And it was like, set denim off in a direction of sexiness. It totally changed the way we think about denim, and now we think about denim as like something very sexy. And so I was like, okay, that's what we're gonna do. So anytime I was gonna say anything about sustainability, there was gonna be like a half-naked girl next to it, or so that was something that we did. And so now when you see us, like you'll see a lot of sexual kind of like undertones in a lot of the things we do. And like sort of the more sustainable it is, the more I like to kind of shove those in there. So that's something we did. Another thing that we did is sustainability has a very like earnest, self-righteous, almost to the point of like verbose tone, speaking tone. So our tone is very sarcastic. It's witty, and I mean, it's just the least earnest tone ever. So if anybody's ever looked at it, there's like a lot of curse words, and it's very sarcastic. So when you read our stuff, it doesn't feel sustainable at all. You're like, we're like, stop using so much fucking water. Or like, I think one of the things like on one of the things we talk about, and like the combination of the two, the dissonance, right? It's really sticky because people don't expect it. So we'll have one sentence where we'll talk about like this t-shirt, this t-shirt is, like an average t-shirt is 400 gallons of water to make, and this t-shirt's 6. Nothing gets us hotter than saving water. And everybody's like, what's... But it makes people stay. The other thing that we did is I realized that sustainability had a very self-righteous sort of, what is that, pulpit type tone. And so we weren't going to be that way. I used Whole Foods as an example. So Whole Foods is really good because Whole Foods will give you all the examples, right? You'll have a conventional, you'll have a local, you'll have organic, and at the whole time they're educating you to all the different options. And so it really becomes on you to make the decision, right? So I'm going to tell you all the different options, I'm going to educate you, and I'm going to let you make the choice. And people will choose the right choice 9 times out of 10, right? And so that's how we talk about things. We never tell people what to do. We sort of are like, here, we're going to explain to you how it is, and we're going to give you like helpful tools, and we're going to let you make a decision. Another thing is I never really understood those like late night commercials with sort of children in Africa starving, and you're like, oh my God, you just like can't wait to change the channel. It's like overwhelming. And so I think a lot of times when people talk about the environment, especially environmentalists, it's like overwhelming. And so it just makes you want to like eat a cheeseburger and like, flood your bathroom because you're like, what are you going to do? And so what we do is we show people like ways that they can incremental changes. These are small changes to your lifestyle that you can incorporate that can be successful. I feel that sustainability efforts will only be successful based on how easy they are for people to adopt into their lifestyle, right? Like, it's very difficult to do a lot of the composting and like making all these like, packing everything yourself and taking it there. It's just very, very difficult. And I think, and this is sort of on a separate topic, I think that the onus should be placed on businesses to make those decisions, because I think it's more difficult for consumers to make those decisions in their daily life. Like, if I want a coffee, I need the coffee. I'm not, if there's only one option for a cup, like I'm taking that option for a cup, right? I mean, if it's styrofoam, I feel really, really bad, but I also just need to get the coffee and like, there's only a styrofoam cup available. And so I think as a consumer, it gets more difficult, right? To make all those choices yourself all the time as you're going through your life and you got all these things to do. But for a business, it's simple, right? Just offer the extra choice. Maybe it's 2 cents extra or 3 cents extra, figure it out in your margin. And businesses can actually make like gigantic differences, right? In the way that they do business. So that's marketing. On sustainability, so some of the things that we do. Also, I'm not timing myself, so give me like, okay, cool. So on sustainability, what do we do? So on the fabric side, we originally started making everything out of vintage clothes, which is very sustainable, right? Because it's all 100% recycled. But as we scaled, that wasn't really possible to keep scaling. So we started to use dead stock fabrics, where we took fabrics that were extra, taken from, mills that had too much or designers that had too much. We still do that today. It's kind of my least favorite option because, I don't know, I don't feel that there's any evidence that it would have entered the waste stream, right? Like it's like a little bit grayish to me. So I'd like that to be a smaller percentage going forward. And then we buy sustainable fabrics. So fabrics that we feel are a dramatic improvement on the status quo. So I'll give you some examples. So our favorite one is Tencel. I'm sure most of you guys know. So Tencel is made by Lensing. It's a cellulose-based fiber. It was originally made to replicate cotton. It's made in a closed-loop system using very low toxic like solvents. It's all made out of FSC certified, I think eucalyptus and birchwood. So it's a very, very sustainable fabric. It has very, very low footprints, and we love that one. Unfortunately, there aren't very many other fibers that have the scores that Tencel does, and so we are sort of limited to a certain amount of fibers, but the limitations are huge, so it's not that big of a deal. So we use Tencel, we used recycled polyester, we used recycled cotton, we use flax a bit, and that pretty much covers what fibers. And then we use viscose. So viscose is not my favorite, but we don't have anything comparable. So going forward, one of my dreams is to get Lensing to make viscose in the same way that they make Tencel. So there really is no reason why they couldn't do it. And so one of the things that we're working on in 2016 is to build a coalition to go talk to Lensing to actually create a production line that would make viscose as sustainable as Tencel. On the business side, like on what we do, we use all renewable energy in all our locations. All the supplies are recycled and the whole thing. So that whole thing's there. Going forward, what we're doing is our next location is going to be something that we build out, which is going to be a sustainable manufacturing campus. So, one of the things is like, it's a big jump for us. So we're growing really quickly. We grow about 2.5 times year over year. And so, and space is very critical to us. We manufacture our goal is to manufacture 70% in-house. Currently, we're manufacturing about 30-40% because we need to build a new facility. So in our next facility, this is going to be our big jump where it's like, we're going to go build a factory. And obviously, like, building a factory carries with it like a lot of capital needs, but building a sustainable factory is a lot more, right? And so this is going to be a big jump for us. We're going to be building 150,000 square foot facility with the whole shebang. So we're working it out. So solar panels and a gray water system, and next on the list would be a dye house and a wash house, and hopefully a printing facility. We think like the next things that are the biggest projects for us on sustainability is, again, getting a viscose type fiber that has the same footprint as Tencel, and then building this facility, and then working towards printing, dyeing, and washing, because I think that's sort of, we have a hard time sourcing that right now. There really aren't a lot of options of sustainable stuff in that area, so it would be obviously something for us to build out. It'd be very exciting. Let's see. I talked about supply chain. Let's talk about the future. So the vision for Reformation is to teach people how to sustainably be fashionable or how to fashionably be sustainable. I haven't decided. Maybe you guys can help me answer that question. But I think for us, like, one of our biggest things is how do we reposition the way that people think about sustainability? I think we're doing a good job now. You know, when we first started, people would say, does anybody care about the sustainability? And I'd say no, but we're going to change that. And I realize that it's changing. And you've seen these changes in the food industry and the automotive industry. I mean, the change in the perceptions of oil. I believe that fashion is a little bit behind, but I think it's going to have that change where people are going to start understanding the impact of their garments, the impact of washing and care, and we would like to be a part of reshaping the way people think about that. And so when we think about going forward, we would like Reformation to be a sort of Bloomingdale's, right? Like a lifestyle destination where people can buy apparel, accessories, home products, consumer goods, maybe some consumer electronics. And these are built on 3 pillars. So the first pillar for us is good products. I think that it's about having a good product. So if you don't have a good product, it doesn't matter if it's sustainable. I think that's why a lot of fashion sustainable companies have gone awry. So first and foremost, great product. The second thing is value. So if there's not inherent value in a product, I don't think it matters whether it's sustainable. And I personally don't believe in a premium for sustainability. Sustainability works on the premise of using less resources. Ergo, it should be less expensive. And then the third thing is sustainability. And so having a store, a destination that people can go to that encompasses all of that, that is sort of what Reformation is going to be. Am I good on time? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I could turn my mic on.
So we're going to have about 15 minutes of moderated Q&A, and then we're going to open up the board of questions.
Thank you so much. That was super interesting. So I'm going to ask you a question that I'm really interested in. So I don't get to do design as much as you do, but we pretend that we do a lot of design around here, especially of products and processes and new chemicals, new molecules. And a lot of the questions we get are, if I put sustainability up front, am I constraining innovation? Am I limiting the portfolio of options that I have because I'm saying I'm only going to work from this space? Do you feel like you're in a box a little bit by saying I'm only going to use these fabrics or these suppliers and not having the whole suite available? Mm-hmm.
So I think the first thing is like when you're making things, I think that it's like a gigantic expanse, right? So there's so many different things you can make. I don't mind having some more constraints of sustainability because at least it gets you focused. And then I think about how you think about it. Like, I think process is sort of the enemy of creativity, right? So I kind of go at it from both ways. Like, we think, what would be the most impactful product line we could make? We're like, okay, denim. All right, let's start there. And then we kind of take denim and we think, can we be impactful there? Can we do something really exciting there? Is it going to be meaningful from a design perspective, from a value perspective, and from a sustainability perspective? We can start over there. And we can start thinking about it from a sustainability perspective. Or we can say a bag line. We want to do a bag line. Should we start there? And then we start to go, how can we get this bag line made? And maybe we get to the end and we say, God, we just don't feel like there's any leather sources or fake leather sources that we feel are up to snuff. So I like it. I like challenges. It makes it a little bit more challenging, I think, but I find it rewarding.
That's so interesting. It's great because we often try to say this is an opportunity for innovation. And it's thinking about what are you trying to provide? What's the service? So it's a bag line, but why are you making a bag? People want to carry stuff. What's the most sustainable way to do that?
Yeah.
And it gives you some more degrees of freedom maybe in the design.
Yeah, you just have to come at it from different ways, like from a sustainability perspective, from like a consumer need perspective, what do consumers need the most, from like a value perspective, and then you kind of figure out where they intersect.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more. I feel like there's a lot of questions, so I'm going to just ask one more, and then I'll let the audience ask some questions. So my other question in the fashion space is there's kind of these high-end luxury brands that are doing sustainability, which I think, I'd put Reformation there. And there's maybe Patagonia, who also has kind of a high-end luxury thing about them, but their tagline is "Don't buy this jacket." Mm-hmm. And then you have H&M and some of these more fast fashion, kind of maybe lower-end brands that are trying to do sustainability. And so how do you see this fitting in around luxury and what sustainable luxury looks like versus trying to get out to the masses with the best you can do, the incremental change that H&M is trying? Mm-hmm.
So our goal is to bring beautiful, sustainable products to mass market. So going to start off at the price point that we're at, because it's where we can start, and then eventually get less and less expensive. I don't like the H&M stuff. I think what do you guys say? I feel like the word's greenwashing. I don't like it. I think it's like, how do you guys, somebody says to me, like, how do you feel about H&M's being so sustainable? And you're like, are you kidding me? Like they have like 3 products that are like 10% more sustainable than the other products. And like, it's a total marketing ploy. I don't like it.
Is that, But
I get upset by it.
I kind of feel like that raises this question though, because the consumer who's not super informed is getting educated by H&M in some way. So is there a re-education or a marketing competition that has to go on to really get to the consumer?
I think the truth will win eventually. So I don't know, there's this good quote, which is like, marketing will, after time, like a brand will ultimately, I'm butchering this, but a brand will ultimately be what its products are. So it will ultimately come back to that. You can like spin for a few years, or like whatever amount of time, but ultimately it will come back to exactly what the products are. And I feel like I'll get upset about the H&M thing, and if it's gonna right itself. Like people are gonna figure out that it's not right, that it's not true. It's like when the calories went on all the menus, like we're all gonna know that salad is like 2,500 calories and it's not healthy.
So on the note that H&M is the McDonald's of the fashion industry.
Yeah, everybody's gonna get it soon enough.
I would open it up. I have more questions, but I'm sure there's lots. So do you want to call on folks so you can pick your...
Sure, my name is Jared. I'm a second-year MBA.
Hi.
So I had a quick question about, you mentioned your belief is sort of the price point should be equivalent or possibly less since it's a sustainable product. But you also mentioned that sort of the capital cost of a sustainable factory is a lot higher than a regular factory. And I imagine also some of the materials that the volume's not there and the quantities that are being produced. So that would affect, I would imagine, your price point and your margins. And can you talk about that positioning and how you see that working?
So capital expenses are independent of margin, right? So you would sort of like I think it's a different part. Sort of. So what you do is you need initial upfront money, but then over time you like amortize it, and it's not that big of a deal. What we try to do is we have very healthy margins because we go direct to consumer and we don't have any middlemen in between, and there's not a lot of competition in this space now that does that similar approach. So we actually have great margins, but that has more to do with our business model rather than the sustainability elements. I do think that, I will say this, I think our mission and our sustainability affords us certain, a certain forgiveness from our customers, like just a little bit more leeway with them. So because they do love us because of what we're doing and they think about us in a good way, I do think that there is there is equity involved with offering sustainable products. I can't quantify it, but I believe that it's there and I have seen evidence of it. But I think the manufacturing is really an element of our business model of domestic manufacturing and fast fashion. So basically what we do is we manufacture things in 2 to 6 weeks. Typically other fashion companies, like I said, are 18 months, a year, 6 months. And so what's happening is they have these long product cycles. And for people that are familiar with the technology industry, right? So you have like the shorter the product cycles, the more opportunity for gathering data and iterating. And so while other companies have only sold something once, we've probably sold it 4 times in that time and gotten better at it and gotten the profit 4 times. We also don't have any inventory issues because we have such short lead times. And so having those quick inventory turns and having very little liability from an inventory perspective gives us really good unit economics. And that's sort of...
So the cost is higher with the sustainability piece, but you balance it with the business model, sounds like.
Sure. I mean, I think I have to think about how much we spend on sustainability a year. It's not exorbitant.
So I guess that's another question around the inventory side, is that also, I would think for a business model is we're going to sell out. If you don't buy now and get engaged quickly, like this is going to go and you're going to miss it. Mm-hmm. Is that part of? Yeah.
So we do. So we run a pretty aggressive scarcity model. I feel bad about it sometimes because it's so manipulative, but basically we have very limited edition runs, which is, it's sustainable in the sense that we have very little extra. So I think typically the fashion industry runs at a 65% regular price sell-through, and we run at a 95% regular price sell-through. We don't have promotional strategies. We purposely sell out. It's hard. You have to have a lot of discipline because you'll like run the math and you'll be like, I could sell 3,000 of these, but I'm only going to make 1,500, and like everybody's like, what? And you're like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to purposely sell out. I always say, like with iPhones, like they definitely could make enough iPhones. They don't do it every single time. Every time. There's never enough.
Thank you very much. My name is Rachel. I'm a third-year joint degree, like Summit, between School of Forestry and School of Management. And all of us in this room, I think, are combinations of those or other schools, and we're paying such a ridiculous amount of money to be at this school. And it's really inspiring to see everything that you've been doing, and without a formal education. And I think what you're doing is what a lot of us would like to be doing, maybe not in fashion, but starting our own business. And so are there certain skills that you had trouble learning, or you think that someone with our education could bring to a business like yours that would be valuable, so that our education is worthwhile? Yes. Why am I here at this school?
So first of all, the grass is always greener. I always wanted to go back to school. I'm always like, I wish I could go back to school. So I mean, if I could go back and talk to my 18-year-old self, I'd be like, what are you doing? Go back to school. So, okay, what are the skills you need? I mean, I work with a lot of MBAs from Ivy schools, so I can talk about personality types that I know, and they're probably similar to your own. Risk. So you have to be comfortable with risk. So I think a lot of times based on, I'm going to make some drastic generalizations, but I would imagine all of you guys have always done well at everything that you've ever done, that has led you to where you are today. And I think that that type of background can sometimes lead people to be risk averse, because taking risks would mean that there could possibly be failures involved. And I would imagine failure has not been part of your psychology. So I would say working towards embracing failure and recognizing that there can be, like, you know, failure and creativity go hand in hand. So you have to fail a lot with being creative, or you have to be comfortable with failure. So I would say that's something, taking risks. I don't think that, I think a lot of times I would say, so risk, I would say believing in things that you don't necessarily have background information to know to be true, right? So I think a lot of times people that have your kind of backgrounds need benchmarks in order for things to be true. But I think sometimes you just have to imagine them to be true and sort of be able to be more comfortable with that. It's also part of the risk averse thing, right? So it's like, I'm comfortable with risk. I'm comfortable with understanding that I don't have any benchmarks to know that this is true, but I'm gonna believe it. I'm gonna go with it, right? Also, like, as long as as you believe it to be 75 or 70% true, like, you should go down that avenue if you think that the end result is good. And then, other than that, I think, like, background of having your guys' education is, like, very helpful. Like, I've had to go and read books on, like, the 60 top most used MBA models, and, like, I've had to learn, like, all that stuff in the past few years in order to be successful in my role. And so you guys are getting a lot of that right now. I have to, like, I have to read, like, what you guys are reading now in order to be like, how to be an effective leader, how to, like, corporate org structures, and, like, all of that stuff. So it's definitely good. I would say the risk and the leaping.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Manya. I'm a first year at the School of Forestry.
Hi.
Hi. I had a question about what you guys are doing to extend the consumer's knowledge or understanding of sustainability. So it sounds like a lot of the work that you do goes into making the products really sustainable, which is great. But then given what you said about fashion, you know, styles are changing constantly. Is there any initiatives to kind of slow that down and kind of decrease the turnover and initiate, like, clothing take-back programs from your consumers or things like that?
Okay. So what we do is we have a product first approach with our marketing. So I think it actually endears people to us. I think there's a prevailing marketing strategy right now, which is, I'm going to tell you everything I'm about on the first landing page, right? It was like, you show up on my website and I tell you everything, exactly what it is. Here's the value proposition. Here's our give back program. Here's our 1-for-1. This is who I am. We try to be a little bit more, have a bit more depth to our approach to consumer engagement. So when you first come on the website, you will see we are a fashion brand, we sell clothes. If you scroll down just a bit, you'll see, actually, we'll start talking about our sustainability initiatives. We'll start doing some education on fashion's impact on the environment. You have to go in. It's not in your face, and we like it like that. We want people to have, like, a bit of a discovery. So on our website, we have a thing that we call the ref scale, where we measure the water footprint and the CO2 footprint of our products. We comp it to industry standards, and then we also highlight the improvements that we have. And every newsletter and a certain cadence on Instagram and all of our social channels will pulse environmental messages. And we'll pick, like, a topic for the month. Like, we're going to talk about garment care, recycling. I don't personally believe in telling people to buy less. I don't think it's reasonable to tell a 17-year-old girl, you don't buy that dress. Like, I would never have listened to such a thing. I think that we need to do, so we don't tell people what to do, but we encourage them on certain practices. This is, if you wash your clothes in this way, they'll last longer. You can recycle. We offer a ref recycling program where we send a recycling sticker with all our packages so people can recycle clothes and it goes off to a recycling center. And we just give people, like, small tools along the way. But again, for me, I don't subscribe to the Patagonia buy less. I think it's like antithetical to what they're actually doing, right? Like it's inauthentic. I think right now we're going through a phase where people have just become so accustomed to super cheap product. My hope is that it will become out of style soon and people will start investing in slightly more expensive clothes. For me, because I know how much a blazer costs to make, like when I go to H&M and I see a blazer there for $12, I like get horrified, right? Because I see a cost sheet and I realize that there's like human misery on like the other side of the cost sheet. I'm guessing that the shift will occur based on labor because I think that that's more of a human like heart wrencher. And then I think my hope is, and I kind of feel that it's true, that in the next 10 years we'll start to see a shift in that. So I don't know who has the mic.
Hi. So like recently you're successful at like raising money for your label. I was wondering what kind of investors you look forward to like back fashion startups and I guess sustainability startups too.
So, I mean, the biggest rule of thumb with looking for an investor is to get an investor that has other businesses that are similar to yours in their portfolio. Because again, like investors are like highly risk averse and they always have to have like similar examples in order to feel comfortable with making the investment. So if you have a business you want to do, you would go, okay, what are some other businesses in the space? Then you go on like Crunchbase or whatever that other one's called, Angel List, and then you kind of look up what's the businesses that are the comps, and then you find the investors that are similar. And then that's sort of how I picked which investors that I wanted. Because also you want them to have similar portfolio companies because those can be helpful to you, right? Like what is blah, blah, blah's return rate? How have they been coping with this issue? And they can give you that helpful advice. I didn't go with sustainability investors. They just weren't comfortable with my business because again, they didn't have any other benchmarks to feel comfortable with it. So I went with fashion and direct-to-consumer investors. And most of the sustainability ones are sort of in clean tech and on energy, the ones that I found.
Cool. I'm sure a lot of us absolutely love what you're doing, and I had never known about the sustainability side. I absolutely hate shopping for clothes, and I just hated it since I was a teenager. I love having new clothes, but I hate shopping just because I hate how workers are treated, generally speaking, and I didn't even know about all the environmental issues as well. My problem is like when I even start looking for clothes that I can support the values behind them in terms of worker treatment, and now I'll look at environmental piece as well. I can't afford the clothes that I want to buy. So I just stopped buying clothes basically entirely. And I just get hand-me-downs from my sisters who are my size, which is lucky for me. But my question is, I know you mentioned, and I haven't looked at the pricing of your clothes, and I will, but I know you mentioned that sustainability does make it cheaper, and then there's this, other, kind of just-in-time ordering and the immediacy that you create, the immediate need. Can you speak a little bit to long term, I imagine that brands like yours will change the industry and make the industry's price point of ethical, fashionable clothing go down. I'm hoping at least. Can you speak a little to the affordability of ethically made clothing in general?
Okay. So right now in fashion, there's like a gigantic opportunity because the way that most of the business models of fashion are set up are just ridiculous. So for right now, there's like an opportunity for somebody like us to be very successful. I would imagine that in the next 10 years or whatever, like they'll start to get hip to the game and they'll start to shift the way their business models are. So basically what happens now is if you buy something, if I'm a designer, right? I'll buy something from a factory in China for $20. No. The factory will make something for $20, right? They'll sell it to a designer or a wholesaler, right, for $30. They'll take 10. They'll sell it for $30. They will, at that point, sell it to a store, let's just say Bloomingdale's for $100, and Bloomingdale's will sell it to you for $220 or $240. So basically, something that costs $20 to make in China is being sold for $220, $240. And so that's the standard markup for things at like Bloomingdale's, anything with like anything where you're buying a multi-brand, like when you're going into a multi-brand store. Club Monaco, Gap, Old Navy, those don't work on that model. That's why those are like less expensive than if you go to Bloomingdale's or any of those other types of places. But they still have these like really ridiculous like business models with like a lot of waste and a lot of inefficiency along the way, right? Where it doesn't make sense. So right now for us, we are getting in on something where we're able to offer like a lot more value to our consumers. And so it has less to do with ethical and it has more to do with having like a smart business model that makes sense. So that's sort of where we're able to thrive. And so as we get larger, right, there's going to be like economies of scale. Like right now, our negotiating power is very small. We can't really negotiate that much. It's like incremental changes, right? But if we the larger we get, the better the economics is going to become for us, right? We're going to be able to negotiate harder. We're going to be able to be making more of things, be more sophisticated in the way we manufacture. Another thing is trying to think about how to explain this in a better way. So basically, there's been a trade-off in fashion, right? So it's become about globalization. So globalization to me means chasing cheap labor around the world. The more you chase cheap labor around the world, the longer the lead times are. The longer the lead times, the more inventory that you have and the less flexibility that you have with an industry that changes as quickly as fashion, right? So I don't know what you want to buy. I have no idea. I'm 18 months out. I'm going to guess and I'm going to have 40% extra that I'm going to have to sell for 70% off. And I know this, and that's how I do my business model. So what we do is this the total opposite. We're gonna make it as quickly as possible. We're gonna pay people more money because we can afford to pay people more money. And we're gonna make money a lot quicker and a lot faster. It's actually how Zara does it. And I don't know why other people haven't copied Zara, but it seems to me to be the best way to do it. So instead of chasing cheap labor around, having poor quality, long lead times, paying people a fair wage, getting them to make it quickly and efficiently, and selling it for more money, but knowing that that you would probably prefer to buy something for $60 that you really want than $40 that you don't really want because it's like was made 18 months ago and it's not what you like anymore. Does that make sense?
One last question. That's a lot of pressure. My name is Thomas. I'm a third-year joint degree, like many others in the room. And my question is kind of about collaboration within the industry. So when you were starting out, were there brands or businesses that you looked to or brands that helped you as you sought to learn about technologies or processes or decisions? And now that you're a leader in this space, are you collaborating? Are there working groups? Are you doing anything to share the stuff that your organization learns with the broader industry?
So I guess the truth is that I'm not the best networker. So I tend to be like a heads down type person than a let's have lunch type person. So I probably could do more of it. I think as we're getting bigger, we're hiring people that are going to be better at doing partnerships. So somebody that we really want to work with is Patagonia. I don't know if you guys know a company called Eileen Fisher in fashion. So trying to work with Eileen Fisher. And then our big project is to develop like a coalition to go and create this fiber that's going to, I think, be really impactful. So that's the type of stuff that we're doing. And if we do it, I'm going to amend my thing. I don't handle the partnerships. We have a head of business operations and sustainability that's really awesome, and she does all of that. So she has relationships with all of the fiber mills, and she's constantly in discussions with them about things that we should be working on together and trading information about fiber and that sort of thing.
If I could just say one more thing, it's interesting that you mentioned Patagonia because some people here have worked there, and they develop all these interesting technologies and then on purpose share them broadly as opposed to keeping them internally and maybe making lots more money. So I was wondering if you were going to comment on that.
Like having open source
Yeah,
Yeah.
opening something to a potential competitor, knowing that it might have a negative financial impact, but a positive environmental impact.
I mean, we would be totally open to doing that. We, as of yet, have not created any new technologies. We're trying to work with Patagonia. They won't work with us, so we're trying to. I'm like gonna wear them down. I'm like, who do I need to meet with? They have an aversion to fashion, and I guess we're too fashionable for Patagonia. But hopefully, we can turn them around. Thanks, guys.